coming. Before we begin, I'd like to have a moment of silence.
Ellen, introduce yourself.
For the victims of the Boston bombing. Can we all spend a minute thinking about how lucky we are and how sad this was? Thank you. My sincere condolences to everybody in Boston, and I hope the survivors heal quickly. My name is...
It's good. It's good. Sound. It's good. Speak right into it.
Okay. My name is Ellen Polity. I am the RIRA president. That's how many people here are Roosevelt Island residents? Please raise your hand. Great. Great. How about guests? Thank you all for coming. It's great. So the Roosevelt Island residents, RIRA is your organization. We are your voice. Everybody, every single member of Roosevelt Island, all 12,000 of us, are RIRA members. So we urge you all to get involved with RIRA. We're all volunteers. And a good example of the volunteers are the great people who provided us with this event today. With everybody in the public safety community, please stand up. Let's give them a round. Thank you. You did a tremendous job. What an organizing feat this was. So many hours of work. And it was so expensive. So I urge you all, we have collection boxes around the room.
We have a special
Okay. So we will talk about that later, but when the time comes, please be generous. I beg you, please be generous. RIRA is a volunteer organization. We are a 503(4) organization, and we get no money except from fundraisers. So RIRA brings you all sorts of events. We are the voice of the committee, we bring you services, we advocate for services, we advocate for good government and better treatment for everyone. So I am really pleased that Senator Serrano is with us today, and we have a lot of other well-known people that are going to be talking. This is going to be a great day. Senator Serrano, thank you for coming, and everybody else we'll talk about later. Thank you all for coming and talking, being willing to talk here, and I welcome you all. Thank you. Now, Erin Mayhem is the chair of the Public Safety Department. That would have been another moment. Hi. That was a great march. Thank you, everybody. Thank you all for coming today. We really appreciate all your support. Good afternoon. My name is Erin Mayhem, and I am the chair of the Roosevelt Island Residents Association. That's our RIRA Public Safety Committee. Wasn't finished. Thank you, Adib. I would like to thank you all for attending today's historic event.
The purpose of the RIRA Public Safety Committee is to act as the liaison between the residents and the Director of Public Safety and to bring forward our concerns in order to find solutions, and that is what we have done. We are here today in numbers, in protest, and with crystal clear demands because of our stated concerns and suggestions that have been stonewalled. The movement that you see today did not fall out of the sky. It is not based on 1, 2, or 3 isolated incidents. We conducted investigations and filed reports. We repeatedly brought our concerns to Director Guerra, but we were repeatedly dismissed. We are through pleading with the leopard to change his spots. We are now demanding his removal. The concerns expressed by residents over the years have remained the same and consistent. Unnecessary and excessive force during detainment and arrest process, false arrests, constitutional right violations, intimidation and harassment, bias and disrespect, and the targeting of our young adults. This pervasive pattern is one of arrest for actions and activities that usually get thrown out of court, and yet residents have to go through the legal system, spending a night or 2 in jail, incurring legal costs on top of being humiliated within our community. Sadly, since 2008, there was not one case discussed with Director Guerra that he acknowledged that his officers had done wrong. That's pretty amazing when you think of it. Look at all of the victims and survivors that you see here today. Not one case brought to his attention did he admit or acknowledge his officers had any wrongdoing in. In cases of harassment and brutality, the use of excessive force, I may change mics. Do you mind? I'm sorry. I can't. I'd like to change mics. Yeah. Too much feedback. Hello? 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 This is better? Can everyone still hear me?
Yeah.
All right, I'm sorry. In cases of harassment and brutality and the use of excessive force, we heard disorderly conduct and resisting arrest. The residents' claim was discounted, then covered up. Victims ended up atomized, then stayed silent in fear of retaliation. In every case, Director Guerra's response was always the same. He blamed the victim. Today you will see a film where the individuals involved, according to the official officer's report, were either resisting arrest or interfering with an arrest. You will take a look and see what you think. I happen to know they're bogus charges. In January 2013, Anthony Jones' brutal attack and unconstitutional detainment, In January 2013, following Anthony Jones' brutal attack and unconstitutional detainment, Monica Vega, our Rosa Parks, refused to remain silent, becoming the catalyst for change. She asked for our help, and our community responded. Our demands are simple. The current public safety leadership must go. Just as any officer who is found to be part of this abusive and brutal culture, which ignores an individual's constitutional rights and revels in the use of excessive force, must go. The slogans, courtesy, professionalism, and respect, are simply lip service to this present regime. What we have seen over the past 5 years is closer in philosophy to contempt, power tripping, perjury, and racial profiling. Our committee is proud of our campaign for change. We are proud of our activists who really reflect the multinational variety of folks who live here on our island. Our fight is transparent and educational. Our opponents, on the other hand, have defended the indefensible with means consistent with their methods, the repression and denial of our constitutional rights. I'm sorry, I need water. I know. Sorry about that, guys. I did this last time, too, and I've got to practice this better. All right. Our opponents, on the other hand, have defended the indefensible with means consistent with their methods, the repression and denial of constitutional rights. Guerra himself hired a law firm to silence our island's media and our residents, threatening our First Amendment right. Threateningly, a flyer was distributed in an attempt to discredit the reputation of a victim. A poison pen letter was sent to our activist employers full of vicious gossip and lies, including information that is only contained in the confidential PDS files, which threatened blackmail if the activist silence was not guaranteed, along with the false arrest and trumped-up charges of our children. These underhanded methods were all initiated to discredit our cause. These tactics show that our opponent's understanding and regard for an individual's constitutional freedom is shallow and contemptuous. We see this counter-campaign for what it is, weak and desperate, and isolated within our community. We are growing in numbers, and our voices are heard. We are tired of being afraid to let our children go outside in the evening to meet their friends, to double park our cars while unloading, or to carefully pass a pulled-over bus. History shows that change comes about when those who need it get organized and fight back, and fight intelligently. That is what we are doing and will continue to do until we win and Garen and his cronies are gone. I want to single out a few people in this growing movement for special recognition and thanks. First of all, my beautiful sister Monica Vega, our Rosa Parks, who stood up and fought back and fought the movement that we have today. All of the victims around us who have come forward seeking justice, putting themselves and their families on the line. All of our committee members whose vigilance and dedication kept us marching forward. Makiva for her strength, Elaine for her patience, Mimi for her positive energy, Jenna for her focus, and Neil for his spirit to fight. Frank to Jesus for his legwork and passion, and Layla for her serenity. And to Adib, whose creativity and perseverance was instrumental in getting the word out through his graphic designs and media releases, to Frank Ferrance for speaking his mind and his indispensable help in printing of our banners, to Chris for his brilliant designs, the website, and his ability to pick up the slack, and to Helen for her commitment and diligence in keeping our posters and leaflets up. And to Ike Nahum for his organizational experience, political and tactical wisdom, and his writing skills. And not to forget to Ellen Pallavi, the Roosevelt Island Residents Association for their endorsement of this cause and unanimous support. I also want to thank our local media, The Wire and the Roosevelt Islander blog for the coverage of this struggle, which has educated the neighbors on and off the island, to Dolores Green, who, even when pressured by the powers that be, supported us and stayed her ground. And to RIOC, I give kudos for the use of the space. I want to also thank all of the wonderful talented speakers and activists that you will have the privilege of hearing today, as well as Councilmember Jessica Lappin, who came and kicked off our march, Micah Kellner, who also came earlier and you probably heard speak, and Senator Jose Serrano, who will be speaking to us in a few moments, and have taken time out of their busy schedules to show solidarity with this cause. Thank you. And of course, Norman Siegel, Michael Laminoff, and all of the others who are here today. Thank you. At this time, Layla has created for this event a poem that she's going to read to us, Ode to Gera.
Greetings and salutations from the Most High. Many of you know me as Layla. Oops. Who drops water. But in the literary community, I am known as Najla. It is great to see so many of you here today for this auspicious occasion and to help celebrate history. This is history today. I was honored to ask to compose a poem for this occasion, and I'm going to ask you to participate. I've given out copies to some of you who have to share with each other. If you look at the poem, you'll see that the first part, there's a chorus part, and I want you to say that part, because I'm not going to say that other word. That's your first part, and at the end of the poem, you'll chant with me. Time to go. So I'm going to read this poem, Ode to Gera. The tides have turned, it's now the hour to get rid of Gera and his abuse of power. Our youth have been harassed, beaten, and wrought with fear. Their parents humiliated and full of despair. Have you tried engaging these young folk more instead of handcuffs and being thrown to the floor? Residents arrested on false pretenses, visitors ticketed for alleged unlawful offenses. We've gathered today for a solid and solemn mass to say, Gera, we're going to kick your We're fired up. Ain't gonna take no more. We sending you getter out the door. We have had enough of you and your hand-picked crew. It is time to leave, time to go. We want you gone, and real soon. We don't need a police chief acting like a goon. It is time to leave, time to go. Time to go. Time to go. Time to go.
Thank you, Layla. That was terrific. And next on our program, we have, and I'm very proud to have, Norman Siegel. He was the director for many years of the NYCLU, and he's a wonderful man and a great activist.
Thank you. Thank you all very much. And thank you for being here today. This is important. One of the reasons when I was leaving Manhattan this morning, some people said to me, "You're going back to Roosevelt Island? Why do you go there?" I said to my friends, one, the issue is extremely important. And second, what I also said is that there's something special going on here. Just look around this room. This is the heart and soul of New York City. There is African Americans, there are Latinos, there are Asians, there are Caucasians, there are young people, and some like me who ain't so young anymore. That is special. Do not underestimate that. As Aaron said, I've been involved in a lot of issues, especially around police-community relations in the last 30 years in this town. And very, very rarely do we get a multiracial coalition of people to build a movement to achieve accountability. The fact that you don't have the TV cameras here today, a few people came over to me and said, well, they're not here. They're not here because of what happened in Boston and the aftermath, the issues of whether or not the accused should get his Miranda warnings. I think he should. But those issues are issues that are still out there, and that's probably why they're not here today. But we don't do what we did today and are doing now because for the TV cameras. In the Civil Rights Movement, Dr. King and SCLC and SNCC, we were taught to keep our eyes on the prize. The prize here is not the TV cameras. The prize is not a story tomorrow in the Daily News or the New York Times. The prize here is to create an entity that will achieve real accountability over people who violate people's rights. It is elementary right. And so today, we can do together something very special. For more than 60 years in this town, people of goodwill, members of the civil rights community, the clergy, and many, many others, have been struggling to improve law enforcement community relations. The struggle to have an independent, fair-minded, effective entity to investigate allegations of police misconduct and hold officers accountable for violation of civil rights has been and continues to be a 60-plus year struggle in New York City. In 1951, probably for a lot of us who weren't there, but in 1951, New York City's first review panel was established. It was a 3-person complaint review board within the police department made up of ranking police officers. In early 1964, 2 Latino New Yorkers were fatally shot by a police officer who claimed the victims were resisting arrest. The officer was exonerated in both cases. In the summer of 1964, Jimmy Powell, a 15-year-old African-American young man, was fatally shot in the back by a police officer. The review panel and a grand jury exonerated the officer. The decisions caused community outrage and unrest. Marches, rallies, sit-ins, all of the above. In the spring of 1966, after the issue that we're dealing with today became a citywide issue, Mayor John Lindsay created a review board made up of 4 civilians that he appointed and 3 ranking civilians from the police department that the police commissioner appointed. You would have thought the world had come to an end. And for those of us in this audience, you probably remember, there was a citywide referendum on the issue of civilian review. The PBA, the police union, vigorously opposed this, with some ads, in my opinion, were racist. And there was a vote, and we lost 2-1. 1.3 million people voted to abolish the Civilian Review Board, and a little less than 800,000 voted to continue it. As a result of that, from 1967 to 1985, the Review Board was within the NYPD, made up of only NYPD officials. In 1985, Mayor Koch set up a review board made up of 12 board members, 6 civilians appointed by the mayor, and 6 made up of civilians employed at the NYPD appointed by the police commissioner. And then in 1998, probably more of you can remember this one, in my opinion, there was a police riot on the Lower East Side of Manhattan in a place called Tompkins Square Park. For 6 or 7 hours that evening, police beat the hell out of a lot of people down there. That created another movement to bring about change for civilian review. I helped draft the legislation. I went to 135 community meetings over a 17-month period in order to get the New York City Council to vote in favor of an independent, truly civilian complaint review board. The point that I'm making here is that this struggle is not easy. This is not a 100-yard dash. This is a marathon. In a marathon where all of you need to stay focused, work together, and build the movement on Roosevelt Island that can be a movement not only to improve police-community relationships here, but as you'll hear in a couple of minutes, to set a model for the rest of the city, the state, and even the nation. Because the issue that we're dealing with here is not unique to Roosevelt Island. The Civilian Complaint Review Board that went into effect on July 5th, 1993, was made up of 13 people. We allowed the mayor to appoint all 13, but we allowed the city council to choose 5 people who would be nominated and appointed by the mayor, 1 from each borough. And the police commissioner would be able to nominate 3 people. That would be 8, and the mayor would choose his own 5, plus, because of the concern of the city charter, we wanted to create it as an independent mayoral agency, and therefore we had to put it under the jurisdiction of the executive branch of government, which is the mayor. We gave him subpoena power, and on July 5th, 1993, many of us who've been struggling over this issue for decades were euphoric. We thought we had won. It's almost 20 years later, and we've waken up and realized that at best, the dream for civilian review and accountability has at best been deferred. And for some of us, we think it's become a nightmare. When people come to me now who are victims of police misconduct, very often I advise them, do not go to the Civilian Complaint Review Board. Only 5% of all the complaints get substantiated, meaning that they find some validity to it. And from that 5%, so if you had 100 complaints, 5 people, they determine it's valid. Of those 5, only 2 actually wind up being disciplined by the police commissioner. And of those 2, it's usually a slap on the wrist. Community meetings that we put into the legislation. About a decade ago, in Bed-Stuy, there was a community meeting. The board members of the Civilian Review Board came. It was an audience about the size that here is today. And they gave them hell. They got up to the mic, and they told these folks on the CCR board they weren't doing what they were supposed to do. It was loud. It was democracy in its best form. But the people who were on the board didn't like being criticized, so they cut the community meetings. We haven't had community meetings in almost 10 years. We put into the legislation and the mission statement the right for the CCRB to do special reports on patterns in practice. That from all the different complaints, you analyze what's going on, whether it's stop and frisk, whether it's racial profiling, and begin to deal with the systemic issues, to train people to undo the stereotypes that exist. We don't get these reports. And finally, there's no police misconduct victims ever been placed on the Civilian Complaint Review Board. They put former cops, former prosecutors, lawyers, maybe a community activist, but no one who was a victim of police misconduct. I think of Thurgood Marshall in the U.S. Supreme Court during the period of the 60s in the Warren Court. It's been written that Thurgood Marshall, the first African American on the U.S. Supreme Court, would sit there on Friday mornings when the 9 justices would talk about the cases. And Thurgood Marshall, African American civil rights lawyer and activist, would explain to the other 8 white Caucasians what it was like to walk in the shoes of an African American male in America. And little by little, the other justices would listen and learn from his experience. When you're talking about police misconduct, we need the victims to be in that room so that they can explain. Anthony Baez's mother was nominated by the Bronx City Council people. But everyone said, we can't put her on the board. And the City Council was cowardly and backed down. The City Council has 5 people that they can put on the review board. And their history over the years has been extremely disappointing in my view. We need people who are strong and who are prepared to go where the facts lead, no matter who it is who is being accused. Whether it's the police commissioner, whether it's an officer on the beat, or whatever. If anyone violates someone's civil rights, that person must be held accountable. So people have lost faith in the Civilian Complaint Review Board. 1 minute on the new panacea that everyone is talking about. I want to caution you. They're talking about an inspector general now. The concept of an inspector general is a good idea, but it has to be independent. Otherwise, it's set for failure. There are problems here. The problems are that they're setting up the inspector general and all the reformers and progressives think this is the way to go. But they're going to put an inspector general in the Department of Investigation who will have to answer to the mayor and to the commissioner of the Department of Investigation. That's not independence. What independence is that let the mayor appoint the person and then let the person have an independent budget and have an independent staff. And that person can only be removed for something like high crimes and misdemeanors. They cannot be removed because of the positions and the statements they make with regard to police misconduct. Because otherwise you will have someone in that position as an inspector general who's always looking over her or his shoulder to make sure that the mayor and the commissioner of DOI approves of what they're saying. And if you have that, you're not going to have independence. So the current proposal is not strong enough. It's not independent enough, and in my opinion, it will not work. So the question becomes, what can be done? Well, back to you, and back to Roosevelt Island. I believe, it's one of the reasons I'm here today, and I'll come back as long as you invite me, is that we can create that independent entity that's been illusory for all these 60 years. For some entity that's fair and effectively investigates allegations of misconduct, because not every allegation is accurate. Sometimes people make things up, sometimes people exaggerate something. But sometimes people are telling the truth. And you can't defer to the law enforcement community, and they don't always tell the truth, whether you know it or not. History has demonstrated that the police cannot police the police. The police cannot investigate the police. If someone makes a complaint about me, I'm the last person on this earth who should investigate whether what I did was correct or not. It makes absolutely no sense. It is a conflict of interest to allow the Roosevelt Island Public Safety Department to investigate itself. That is a no-brainer. So we need our friend here, our friend Jose Serrano Jr., to go to Andrew Cuomo and your colleagues in the Senate and the Assembly and tell them that we have to create an independent Roosevelt Island Civilian Review Board. This board should be made up of 7 board members, all appointed by the governor. And it needs to be diverse, just like this room. It has to be diverse racially. It can't be all white folks. It has to be diverse gender-wise. It can't be all men. It has to be diverse professionally, occupation-wise. It can't be just lawyers, no matter how good some lawyers are. It has to include former law enforcement people, because we need their perspective. And if they're good law enforcement people, they should be even more outraged than we are because of what people are doing to their profession. Good cops will support what we're talking about. As I said before, it means an independent budget, set at a certain percentage of the citywide budget. It needs a staff, an executive director, a legal director, a couple of lawyers, a couple of organizers. It needs at least a journalist to be able to write those special reports that are so needed to bring focus on systemic problems, and it needs people who are educators to train the Roosevelt Island Public Safety Department, because we don't want to stereotype them. They stereotype us, but two wrongs don't make a right. So we have to give the benefit of the doubt for the people on the Public Safety Department, but sending them a message that if they violate their rights, anyone's rights, they'll be held accountable. This can be done. It can be done if we stay together. It is time to achieve fairness and accountability. When law enforcement and the police do a good job, as they did in Boston, I loved Friday night when I saw the TV footage of people in the street clapping for law enforcement. When they do a good job, we'll cheer them and we'll praise them. But when they violate people's rights, when they violate people who are innocent, we need to hold them accountable. So, in a constitutional democracy, I submit nothing else will suffice. So let's continue to speak out. Do not allow the cynics and the naysayers to lose our focus. Let's continue to march and rally. Let's work together. Together, we can make this happen. Let's do it for Amadou Diallo. Let's do it for Sean Bell. Let's do it for Vivian Bush. Let's do it for Eleanor Bumpers. Let's do it for Anthony Jones. Let's do it for all the victims of the Roosevelt Island Public Safety Department. And finally, let's do it for ourselves. What I've said can be done. What I've said should be done. The only question today, in April 21, 2013, is whether or not we're together enough to make it happen. Thank you all very much.